In this section, we're going to go through a way of iterating through folders and files and such. So what we're going to do is just create a bunch of directories. The first thing I want to do is we created up here the last time, one of the previous times that we ran the script, we created the all years directory that is in our documents. Actually, I'm in documents right now, so I can just do a listing and see that we have a empty directory of all years. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a bunch of directories. So I'm going to define a new function called create directories. And I'm just going to create a range. So for I in range, and let's just make them like similar to years. So we'll just go through the years from 1900 all the way through 2017. So what this is going to do every time it runs, it's going to be 1900, 1901, 1902, and so on until we get to the year 2017. And we're going to use os make dir. And we're going to convert that to a string. And we're just going to be the value of I. And actually, before we run this, what we need to do is, so up here we changed directories into our documents. So users/user/documents. So if we change our directory from there, we'll do that again. Except we'll use a relative path since we're going to be in documents already. So in order to do that, we just call change dir. What we can use is a dot, then a slash. So dot means current directories slash, and then we need to pass in all years. Okay, so we just need to call our function. And I'm going to go ahead and save the file, and then let's go back into our working directory where our Python script is. And we see Python file system. We can see that inside of our all years directory, we now have another folder for every single one of these years that we loop through. Okay, so let's go back to our working folder. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in several lists here, and then we're just going to make a bunch of random files with a bunch of random sentences in them. So what I'm going to do here is define a new function to create a sentence. And to just make everything above easier to see, I'm going to toggle on the soft wrap. So if I go to, forget where it's at, toggle soft wrap. So you can see is instead of having one really long line, it'll wrap around to several lines. Okay, so as you can see, based on these words, that some of the sentences that we put together are going to be pretty interesting. So we're going to create a random sentence using random words, and since what we need to do first is import the random package. And since random is not really the scope of this video, I'm just going to copy and paste the formula that we're going to use. So basically, we're just putting the structure of a sentence together using some nouns and verbs, and then connecting them together with infinitives and so on. I mean, it should be pretty self-explanatory. So after create a sentence, we're just basically we're just gonna trigger a random file name. So I'm just gonna make a function called getFileName, and then we're just gonna return a string. And call the getRandBits method, pass in 128. We'll just add a file extension to make it a text file. Okay, the next step is going to be to create some random files. So I'm going to define a new function. And what we're going to pass in is the directory, and I'm going to use the underscore prefix for dir because dir is a reserved keyword in Python, so we don't want to accidentally overwrite that function. Now, when we iterate through our directories, we're going to use the os.walk method. And so what we're going to be getting back is subdir, dirs, and files. And this is going to be returned to us every time we iterate through this loop, a tuple containing 3 items. So os.walk. And we need to pass in our directory. And what we're going to do for right now is just print the subdirectory. And then so we commented out create directories. We don't want to create them all again. It'll just get an error because all those directories already exist from the last time we ran the script. So let's go ahead and create our random files. And so what we need to do is pass in the directory os.get current working directory. And as if you recall from up here, we basically changed into the all years directory, so this should work. So if I go ahead and save the file, and then if we run that. And so we've gone through this whole os.walk iteration, and we've printed every single subdirectory, which is it's returning to us this full path for every single one of these. So what we need to do at this point is create our random files. So what I'm going to do is set up a new for loop for I in range. And so we're going to create anywhere from 1 to 10 files. So let's just use our random package again. So we need random.randint. So this will give us a random integer, and we're going to go anywhere from 1 to 10 files. So each directory is going to have a different number of files in it once we run this. So let's create a new variable called new file. And we're just going to use get file name. And actually, before we run this whole thing, what I'm going to do is just show what this is going to look like. So let's just call create sentence. Followed by get file name. So if we save that and if we run that, so basically we're getting a random thing, and then our files are going to look a random sentence, and then our files are going to look something like this, just a long string of numbers followed by .text. So we go ahead and comment these out and then return to our for loop. So we're going to get one of these file names, and then what we're going to do with that is basically write it to the file system. So we're going to call the open function. So we need to pass in the subdirectory, and then followed by a /, and then our new file name. And we're going to set the mode to W for write. And then we're going to create a sentence and write that to the file. So f.write. And let's just call it create sentence. Okay, so what we're doing is we're looping through all of our subdirectories, and then so from any random interval between 1 and 10 times, we're going to create 1 to 10 new files, assign it a random file name, and then give it a random sentence. And so we should get a bunch of files in all of these folders once we run this. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out since we no longer need it. And let's just create random files. Actually, we are already calling this method, so this function. So if we go ahead and run this, we should get a bunch of files created. Let's go ahead and clear this, and then let's go ahead and rerun. Okay, so if I back out of here, and then so inside of our all years. Okay, so as you can see that we've created a bunch of files in all of these folders. And at this point, we could create another function to go ahead and list all of our files. And let's go ahead and create that. Let's comment this out so we don't rerun this. So I'm going to define a new function, list files. And let's go ahead and pass our directory in again, _dir. And let's set up a list. So we'll just start with an empty list. And so just like this line above, we're going to use the osWalk method. So I'm just going to paste that in. And let's say for name in files. And we're going to go r.append. And we're going to use another method from the OS library, os.path.join. We're going to pass in the subdirectory followed by the name. And then so once we append all of the files to our list, we're just going to return the list. So return R. And let's go ahead and list our files. We need to pass in our os.get current working directory. And if I go ahead and save that, let's go down here and clear it. First, we need to cd back into our working folder. And actually, we made a mistake. We need to set this to a variable, or we could have just, we would have to call the print function or something in order to see it. So we'll just do it this way. We'll set it to a variable and then pass the variable into the print function. And let's go ahead and try this again. And we basically have a really long list. It's kind of difficult to read, so we'll call this 4f in files. And as you can see, each line, it's given us the full path. Since we joined together the subdirectory would have been this right here, followed by the name of the file, which is over here. So we basically appended that together. So if we run this full path, we would be able to get into the file. Let's just do that real quick. Okay, and then there's our sentence that we randomly put together. Okay, so we got some stuff put together here. So the last thing that we're going to do before we call it a day when it comes to this section of the video course is that we're going to create a search. Let's create a search function. So we're going to expect two arguments here. First, a search term and the directory once again. And we're going to create a empty list called matches. And since we already have our list of files, we can just go ahead and grab that. So we want to call the function that we wrote just a couple minutes ago. And then that's going to basically give us our list of files. And now we can loop through the individual files. Especially since we have the full, it returns us the full path anyway. So it should be very helpful here. Let's go for F in files. And so what we need to do now is open the file that we're looping through. So with open, using the open function, F, and then what we're going to pass in is the R mode for read. And we're already using the variable F. That's what I usually assign the inside the with block to open, but let's just use double F since we've already used a single F. Let's create a new variable, contents equals ff.read. And then we can say if term, so the term is in contents, we want to append to our matches list. Okay, and actually we have to do one more thing. Since we have a list, we have to return that from the function. And down here, we will just create a new variable called matches. And let's search. And we'll search for the word king. And then we also have to pass in the directory. So once again, we'll os.get current working directory. So now that we have a matches list containing our matches, we can just loop through that. Okay, now we can go ahead and test this out. What I'm going to do is move this back. Let's go ahead and clear everything. And let's go ahead and run this. So basically everything with the word king, every file that has a sentence with the word king is what we're getting back. And obviously the words that we randomly put in kind of gives us some pretty bizarre sentences. Okay, and the final thing that we're going to do, we're going to clean up the mess that we created. We're going to just basically delete all the stuff that all the files that we created. So I'm going to create a new function called remove all. And once again, we're going to pass in a directory. Actually, I'm going to set this to pass for the moment. What we need to do is import another library, the shutil. That is a high-level file operations utility that Python offers. So let's go ahead and import that. I'm going to jump to the very top here. And so returning back to our function, we're going to call shutil dot remove tree, so rm tree. And then all we need to do is pass the directory in. In fact, we really didn't need this function. We could have just called this as is, but that's fine. Let's go back down to the bottom. So it's called remove all. And so we'll pass os get current working directory. And we go ahead and save this. Let's just comment this out. And let's go ahead and rerun our file. And then if we navigate back to documents, all years directory is completely gone. So in this section we've covered iterating through files and folders and creating random files and folders and removing them all. And actually searching through them is also another thing that we covered. So this sums up the video on the Python using the file system. Thank you for watching.